take a look at a little bit more data. So I have a data set that I mounted up here, which is a list of accesses to Wikipedia. And it actually says here Donald Trump's inauguration, but this data set, that's not actually correct. I realize the data set I grabbed here is from the State of the Union speech. And it's just interesting because when big events happen in the news, like a president gives some big speech, you can see that people go to Wikipedia and start looking up the stuff that that person is talking about. So it's kind of an interesting data set to see what were people searching for when Trump was talking about whatever was going on in that State of the Union speech. So let's see. I have this file here called pageviews.gz, which is analytics data from Wikipedia. So they publish all this stuff for free. You can just go grab it. That's all I did. I put it in an S3 bucket and attached it here. And if we wanted to take a look at that file and we had no idea what was in there and just wanted to see what's inside, we could do something like this. We can say spark.read, which gets us access to a kind of helper for reading in data. And then we're going to say .text, which is the format, because we don't know yet what's inside this file, so we're going to try text. We're going to give it a path, and we're going to say .show, because what we'd like to do is actually run this query and look at a few records. So if we run this query, you can see that we get a bunch of results back, and it looks like we've kind of got a space-delimited data set. I happen to actually know what the schema is here because there's a data dictionary on Wikimedia's site that tells me. But this is how you could take a look at a file really quickly. If you didn't know what was in there, you can just do a spark.read.text. Now, in fact, from looking at the data dictionary on the Wikipedia site, I know that this is a space-delimited file that's basically like a CSV, but again with spaces. I'm going to tell Spark to figure out the schema here on its own. And I'm also going to rename the columns. So this particular data set doesn't have a header row that names the columns, and I happen to know what these columns are called, so I'm going to go and give these columns some names. The first one is the Wikimedia project, like English or French or English books or Wikitravel. The second one is the name of the page, like main page or United States. The third column is the number of requests to Wikipedia for that page in this particular hour. This data set represents 1 hour. The fourth column used to contain bytes, but it's no longer used, so it's got zeros in it these days. And if we run this, you'll see that we don't actually get an answer on the screen, right? We don't actually get a report here. What we get is an output of a thing called a data frame. And a data frame in Spark is a really interesting thing because it's not an actual chunk of data. It represents a query. And that's actually something it takes people a little bit of time to get used to when they're working with Spark, because in some other tools like R or Pandas, a data frame is a container object that has your data right there. You can go in, look at it, change it. In Spark, a data frame represents a query. So a data frame doesn't actually contain any data. It's just instructions. And we can use a data frame to make other data frames or to eventually create some results. Now, I can use the data frame API directly, and we'll give a demo of that later, but for now, let's just take a quick look with SQL. So the way I can link an arbitrary data source from any of those sources, any file format, and be able to talk to it as if it were a table in Spark, I can do that by going create or replace temp view. So in this example, you can see I'm calling this thing page counts. And now if I come in with SQL and do a describe on page counts, right, you can see the schema here. So you can see that Spark has kind of figured out what the data types are. And then I can write plain old SQL queries. So without any further work, I can just go ahead and say, you know, how many requests were there, say, to the English project. If I want to see the top results, so this is where we get to see what people were searching for during the State of the Union speech, because we'll see the most popular queries during that hour. This is data that Google and Facebook have internally, but they don't share it with us. Wikimedia is kind of interesting because we can get all this stuff. It's public. So here you can see that this was a couple of years ago, but during that speech, you can see there were some Kennedy figures and some other stuff that came up in the context of that speech, and people started searching for it during the actual speech. And maybe we'll do one more, like we can see how popular was Apache Spark.